So good evening, everyone. I'm James, President of the Canberra Jung Society, in case you've forgotten who I am or wonder who I am. Thank you for joining us here at MacKillop House and online. Let us first acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. This evening, we're delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Saan Ecker. Also with her is Joan and Giselle, therapist, and friend Elise. Thank you very much for coming. We love having you. Tonight, Saan will be speaking about her experiences providing therapy in nature, including equine, assisted therapy, and ecotherapy. Saan and her physiotherapist partner, Joan, have provided therapy and workshops from a rural facility for 10 years and have worked with everyone from children living with neurodiversity to company directors, supplementing their therapy skills with time in nature and with the inclusion of a herd of Arabian horses for an adventure. Dr. Saan Ecker is a clinical psychologist, a Master's of Clinical Psychology and Diploma in Psychotherapy and Counselling. She has provided psychology, psychotherapy and counselling for over 50 people of all ages. Saan works in a non-profit mental health sector. She has a PhD in human ecology and continues her career in social science research. So following Saan's presentation, we'll have a quick break and resume for discussion and question. I will be recording this for later reference. If you're here on Zoom, please remain muted while Saan is speaking. Use Zoom chat for comments, and we'll open up later for discussion. So thank you very much. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Jean. Hello, everyone, and hello, everyone on Zoom. And thank you very much for coming, and thank you for inviting me, Jean, and I'm really happy to be here again at the Jung Society. This is my wife, Joanne. Joanne has what's happening in the presentation, so we're doing an bit of an impro here. Yeah, so we'll go to the first slide. So the timeline to becoming a nature therapist. So this was Jung's timeline that I pieced together around having a problematic childhood and lack of nurturing at home, and as a result, really seeking nurturing and time in nature, and nature becoming really part of family and the caring environment. I actually also just want to add, I'm very understudied in Jung. I have always wanted to do more, and this was a great opportunity for me to get sort of more in sync with Jung. But so I just want to let you know, I am certainly no expert. He also had a drive to understand natural sciences. He had a tendency towards nature mysticism.
Ratio.
As he matured, he really wanted to bridge the divide between spirituality and science, and looked towards psychology as a way of doing this. This also happens to be exactly my timeline. These things are all completely true for me. Yeah, in terms of mine. Okay, so we are going to talk about equine therapy to start with. So as Jean said, we've been doing equine assisted therapy for about 10 years, and we're one of the first to sort of start in the region. And we've had quite an amazing journey. So but just to what is a horse all about? So we used to hunt them for prey up until somewhere between 6,000 and 3,000 BC. We started, they either started domesticating us or we domesticated them. They started breeding near human habitation. There is very scant evidence, information about how this actually happened. So it's actually a place of mystery itself. How did the horse and human, how did it go from being a prey animal, which, as you see, would have been extinct if it hadn't become domesticated? We were hunting it so voraciously. Yeah, we know that there has been some ritual burying, even people being found buried with horses, bits of tack, and obviously horses buried with love and reverence from 2000 BC. So yeah, but despite this very long and productive, you know, just to throw in there that it was the horse societies, of course, that were able to dominate the world. You know, so the horses had quite a bit of impact on human society, but nevertheless, we really know very little in terms of a scientific way about what this horse-human connection is about. There is very, very few research studies are very, very few and far between that try to capture how do horses influence humans and vice versa. The ones that there are often things like, you know, how does a nervous rider make a horse show jump not as well? That sort of study, there's a bit of that, but in terms of trying to understand the relationship, is not very much at all. Therapy, thanks, Elise, is any application where the horse, a therapist facilitates some kind of an experience that involves a horse. It is such a wide and varied, unregulated, ungoverned, exponentially growing form of therapy that almost anything goes. And I think that we're seeing even more people. I've got a horse. I will do a short course in counselling and become. I think that's, why not? I mean, who knows? I don't, you know, but it's certainly not endorsed, quite strongly not endorsed by psychology organisations. Up until recently, they're still not endorsing it, but they're not coming hunting for people who were doing it so much anymore. But yeah, it's not really endorsed. It doesn't have any evidence base. The only way psychology, as you know, or counselling gets an evidence base is through hundreds of randomised controlled trials, which are usually need massive amounts of investment from some sort of, sometimes pharmaceutical companies, sometimes you know, other agents, but nobody's putting that sort of investment into equine assisted therapy research. So what is this? What is going on and with horses and indeed nature? Because there are very, very few equine therapy outfits that don't involve nature. So you're necessarily going out to, I mean, some of them are in more clinical, stable sort of environments, but most of them are out in nature. One study, which I can't remember the reference to it, actually found that the benefits of simply visiting a farm were the therapeutic benefits of stepping onto a farm were already quite significant. Never mind even having a therapist or a horse or a goat. So some of the theories on, I will get to the Jung sort of connections, but I'm doing the sort of thing that, you know, Jung was struggling with too, the science. There's, you know, got to become, we've got to be validated by science. So what is it about that might be working here? There are quite a few studies that have shown there has efficacy in equine assisted therapy, but nobody's pulled apart what is actually going on. Is it the therapist? Is it being outside? Is it the horse? Is it you know, what is it? So some of that generally with animal assisted therapy is that we're forming attachments and bonds to these animals, and so we're learning about that. So some people, another theory is that just anything to do with relaxation. So it could also be boating or fishing or, you know, walking, all those activities, just being around the horse, being on a farm, just physically, it brings some sort of relaxation. It could be just that. The psychosocial learning. So animals, most animals, mammals have a very similar set of communication skills to what humans do, almost identical. You know, all the different types of emotions, mad, sad, glad, you know, disgust, fear. You know, we share them with them. We also share the way, you know, looking away means you don't want something. Looking at somebody means you want something. Running away means you don't want to be there. Coming towards. All those sorts of social communications are very similar. And then the fourth idea is that there's something, and this is where we're getting to the spiritual, psychological sort of interface, or the metaphysical interface, is that there is some sort of physiological effects that are going on in the presence of nature and horses. So how can we measure this effect? There are some of the ways we can do it. Things that we can measure, like hormones, health parameters, heart rate, blood pressure, etc. Heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is a measure of where your nervous system. It gives information on whether your nervous system is in the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, or the sympathetic, the fight, flight, freeze. So it's a very complicated measure, but it gives us some information about that. Or other instruments like mindfulness tests, or anxiety tests, or any other sort of written psychological tests. Or is it something that can't be measured? So some of so now we're getting a bit more into the Jungian ideas, and Jo is a Gestalt therapist, and she walks the line of between evidence-based and sort of deep sort of psychological work completely without any effort, as far as I'm concerned. So as well as those other things I mentioned, could it actually be some of these more concepts that were more that are more Jungian concepts? That the interbeing, the value of interbeing, just the value of connecting to another being that is like you, that you realize that you can have a connection. So our herd of Arabians work as they're a herd. They have no idea that they are something. They would be something different or less than we are. Our horses are very, very proud. We treat them as equals. The word equus actually comes from is equal to humans. So our horses will actually go up and greet people as equals, and they have no idea that anyone's going to harm them or force them to do anything. They understand everything is a negotiation. So they meet people, and this is one of the things that a lot of equine therapy people will talk about, is that it matters how the herd lives. If the herd lives its most natural form, where it has its social aspects intact, then it will matter. So examples when our herd leader will come up, when we have groups there, will come up and greet every person. He will check out everything. Make it. It's never not happened. We now know to look for this. It's like, because he won't do it all. You know, just I've done that one, and he will actually go up and do something. He might touch them, but he'll look at them and he's bringing them all into his herd. And these sorts of experiences for people, when somebody, one of the most common things that people say when they've been doing equine therapy, is quite an odd thing to say, and they will say, the horse did not judge me. That's an odd thing to say. But we hear it again, and it's one of those themes that over and over again, the horse didn't judge me. So the other thing that I will hand over to Joe to talk a little bit about is that we, even in so equine therapy can be many things. So you can bring all the modalities of psychology and counselling into equine therapy. You can use everything, CBT, Gestalt, DBT, acceptance and commitment therapy. There's nothing that you can't bring, because you can do anything that anywhere, right? You can have your toolbox anywhere. Having a horse around can only enhance these things. But one of the things that we do is equine systemic and family constellations. Do we need to be sort of that camera? Or?
You can move a little bit.
So I very much come from a systems background, and with Gestalt therapy and 25 years as an air traffic controller. So my mind works in systems. And what we found, we started doing systemic work in groups with people, where people will represent different parts of a system. And what you're looking for is the social geography they come. A person who walk away, be attracted somewhere like that, or close up, open up, all the different things. And what we're asking in the systemic work is that you do your reports phenomenological. So not what you think the story is in your head, not trying to be to create a story or anything, simply reporting what happens to you. I actually tell people to just describe the social geometry, who you want to look at, where you want to go. Do you have a movement? What would it be? And what we found is that the horses do this work really well as well. They also are attracted, repelled, will move towards people, away from people, will look at different people, will move up. And we've had the horses where they've moved up and tapped someone on the heart. Where they've sort of moved. We've had someone who in immense fear of a horse, with a lot of support of other horses and people representing parts of her life, sat on this big, beautiful black Arabian and talked of her deep yearning for a partner, and just allowed themselves to fully be themselves without judgment, without judging themselves either. And out of that, they were attending 4 lots of 3 days of training, and turned up the next workshop saying that someone who had actually been in their life was suddenly a partner. And then, like, within a year, we had an invite to their wedding. So things the changes that can happen within someone when they allow themselves to fully be impacted by both the horse and the people and themselves and the interactions. We've got lots of different examples.
So basically, in this constellation, systemic and family constellations, typically humans will represent. You can also use rocks or anything, because the subconscious doesn't care. The parts of my life I can see laid out in front of me, and I can assign. I know that's this part, that's the other. So when horses are used, there is this seamless apportioning of those parts of someone's life to the horse. So people will immediately say that horse is a family constellation. Yes, oh, that one's definitely my mother, and that one's my brother, and that one, yep, oh, that's my uncle, and yeah, I don't want to look at that. You know, they will. It will just immediately, the horses will be given and take on. Now, we don't really know what happens, but it happens also with humans in this work, that suddenly the horse will, it's named by as its mother, either by, sometimes by the therapist, by the client, will say which one is most like your mother, that one. And then that horse is acting exactly like my mother. The horse will start doing exactly what the mother does. That's what the person will perceive, and that's what the person will tell us. So we see it too. So is there a little bit of interbeing going on there? We don't know, but it doesn't matter really. The person will get what they need. They will get to speak to their mother, even their deceased members of their system. The horses can represent. We've got and a lot of information can flow. Information that can't flow in necessarily in an office. So, for example, we had someone who came out because their father had passed away, I think it was a year or two, and they had just not been able to move on. They were just full of grief. They were just absolutely full of grief. And our herd leader, who was the horse earlier, one of the horses earlier that you saw, the Palomino horse, he was chosen as the representation of the father. And instantly, he's a very nervous horse. He's got PTSD. He's very anxious. But immediately he became calm and stood beside her. So, you know, something's going on, some interconnection. She is seeing him as her father. There is no question in mind. Her father is there. And he's just following her around, being with her. And then we talk about letting go. And she's like, I've got to let him go. And she's pushing the horse away with her hands. But you could see, and the horse is actually coming closer. And you could see that even though the intention was to push away, everything else was saying, come here, come here. And the horse was responding and coming closer and closer. And there was a great information because you could see, oh, okay, I'm craving that so much. Even though I'm telling myself I'm letting go, I'm actually, so just, and she went home and she cried for like 3 days, and she was through it. So these moments of, so these horses are they're very attentive to us. So Arabians, we think Arabians are the greatest horses. So Arabians are the horses that have had most to do with people. They are the horses that were taken in the tents. They were taken along not to do work, but because it was so beautiful to have them around when tribes travelled with their horses. They were fed camel milk and dates and not had to do anything but just be there. So they know us. They weren't here when we evolved, like the dogs, but earlier than the dogs. They have been around for so long. They watched us get up on our feet. They're where they're predated. They know so much about us. They can read our body language way before we know what we're going to do.
We had one more example of someone who had 3 workmates and wanted to get out of that situation, but really was complicated, couldn't make any sense of why it wasn't happening, why whatever he wanted was not happening. And so he went in with 3 of the horses.
You know that generally, there's been research showing that it does help people's mental health. Exercise is a big part of that, of course. It's one of the things we can measure. And just generally, environmental volunteers, are more physically active. This isn't really very interesting. That's why this is not evidence base. That's why we're not getting randomized controlled trials. And this, how do you measure this? There's no way of measuring it. But it comes together. The more you do it, the more you appreciate nature, the more you do it. If you don't start, you don't get going. Once you get going, it rolls on. So obviously, having a relationship with nature is going to help us with our environmental crisis. People are going to be more connected and so on. Okay, a bit of theories. You know, attention duration theory, that it restores us. We're able to do something that doesn't involve our phones but involves actually concentrating on something other than our own problems. And it can be quite, you know, interesting. Again, the relaxation, maybe we just feel relaxed there. And there's also been studies that show that the more diverse the natural environment is, the better we feel. Anyway, this is our last slide, just to sort of bring in some of the Jungian ideas about this, why, because, you know, as far as I understand, you really saw nature as a incredibly healing environment and very important. So it allows us to really experience these archetypal experiences, like I showed you with the rock pool. Just spending time in nature. So this is basically some of Jung's ideas, not mine. It helps us connect with ourselves, reflection, solitude, rejuvenation. And he's spent a lot of time in the countryside, I believe. It's also, as we've talked before, it's a rich source of symbols and metaphors. The alchemy, which we noticed when the river had turned into a rock pool. These things really feel like, wow, I can change too. Like, if this river can change, so can I. Whatever. There's powerful messages in that, and that nature is really this extraordinary arena for us to discover who we are in relation to this incredibly diverse field that can give us information about ourselves. You want to add anything else? Oh, no, don't worry about that slide. Just go back to the last.
The natural world mirroring the inner psyche, allowing individuals to integrate their conscious and unconscious aspects. So that's a lot of the time when we're doing this, giving the space and the silence for that to actually happen. And the space, the silence, and the awareness. So we help sometimes with a bit of the awareness.
So thank you very much, everyone. I hope that was useful to you.
It just makes such sense in terms of horses having like a telepathic connection with people almost, if that makes sense. But what I'm interested in is how this, and I think your quotes from Jung were quite spot on in terms of a lot of the criticism of our mainstream society, because there's a line from the philosopher René Descartes that animals are machines and that they're not conscious. So there has been this sort of dominant attitude within Western society that's really profoundly alienated from nature. That sort of disconnection is an enormous source of social trauma and personal trauma. And so the idea that respect for nature, connection with nature, the interconnectedness that you were talking about has a therapeutic function. I think that your point about how this sort of therapy is can really help people with mental health is really important. So thank you very much. And I just really that sort of reflection on how distant our mainstream culture is. Like, you look at kids who are obsessed with screens, and like, you know, there are some who do have a connection with nature, but many who simply don't. Like, there's really big social trends of complete separation from nature. And so working to overcome that is just so important. And just one final thing, I think of it in terms of some of the theological categories of grace and corruption, that in a state of grace, and so connecting with horses helps to bring us into a state of grace that is what we really need for our salvation.
Thank you. It's a beautiful reflection. And yeah, I mean, I agree. I think horses are a lot more accessible to a lot of people than other aspects of nature. So yeah, I do think that the fact that horses are getting people out into nature, I think there are really several equine therapy businesses around Canberra now. There's probably a dozen or more that, you know, people are coming, at least spending that time in nature. And I just want to say too about the young people that maybe are disconnected from nature. There's also a large group, and you know, not an insignificant group of young people who are very connected to nature and are very distressed, and you know, climate change anxiety, and you know, sort of anxiety about nature is, you know, is a huge thing that we see amongst, you know, the clients. I mean, I'm always quite pleased in a way that I see that, because that when people come to therapy with that, and it is starting to be, I think it'll be in the next DSM or the one after it, you know, the psychology manual, that climate change anxiety will be a thing, or environmental anxiety, what's happening to our planet. And when those people turn up in our Aspen therapy, it really is, they found the right place, because we can, you know, we can give them tools to really explore that and find positive paths through that, instead of the absolute depression that a lot of young people are feeling. So yeah.
Avoid those sort of chemical masking of their psychological conditions.
Well, any therapy, you know, any non-pharmaceutical therapy is valid, and in fact, you know, there's a rule of thumb that you should try 10 of therapy before you try any medication. Now that's not happening. People are getting medication before they've even tried therapy. Like, what's that about? I mean, that's a disaster itself.
There's also this thing with equine therapy that we've found, is that it's the last resort.
Yes.
The last resort for children with trauma, for PTSD. So people have tried a lot of things, and this is it. They're lost, and they'll turn up. And what we've found the success is that this opens up again, where they can calm themselves enough, or breathe enough, or whatever it is, to then to be able to go back to the gym, and go back to to talk to their psychologist or whatever. So it's often been used as the last resort, and it changes just enough for other things to start to work again.
Yeah. Yeah. Office-based therapy does not work for everybody. And cognitive therapy, just talking about concepts to and fro with your therapist, can be very useful, but it's not for everybody, and it is very limited when you could be using the natural world and other beings. Why not? Yeah.
I was just talking to someone about one of the just the most basic of examples was someone with PTSD who had come out. We went down to the horses and they were all laying down, and we just sat down, and we actually sat for an hour and didn't say a word. And at the end, she looked at me and said, "I've forgotten how to rest. I've just had an hour learning about what rest looks like." So it can be as simple. So we don't always know what it is, what the learning will be. And that's part of what we have to do, is get out of the way of any goals. Or if people come with a story, sometimes we'll say, that's actually not how we want to start. Let's just be here and see what happens.
Yeah, so we have one example of someone who had tried about 15 years, a soldier, veteran who had
started to talk about walking down the road. You were fixing the video up before.
Oh, okay.
So you can.
Oh, you already talked to it. Yeah,
but you add your bit to it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we were watching it and sort of supporting it. We had some theories about what was going on, but we never discussed that with her. We never discussed any of this with her. And she wrote back to us, and I was able to regulate my nervous system because, the horse basically wouldn't come with me until I did. And so in that hour, I learned for the first time in my life how to regulate my nervous system. First time in life since her trauma. And and she just said after that, her life, she was back.
So that was
1
the
hour
skill she needed
with the horse, yeah,
to be able to re-engage with a lot of other parts of her life.
Yeah.
So is that something about the natural human want for acceptance? Like we want togetherness, we want partnering. The fact that, the horse wouldn't go. I mean, obviously she chose not to go as well. Like, she would obviously stop or something like that. But we just
certainly that theme turns up so much with the acceptance and wanting to be loved. I think that example was a little bit different. That was simply two nervous systems in an arena together. So our leader, he's a very flighty horse, but he's learned to keep himself still, but in the frozen way. And she's like, come with me. He's like, I'm not going with you. The horse is saying, you haven't regulated your nervous system. There's no way I'm going with you. And so then she regulated her nervous system. After it took about 4 minutes, isn't it? She finally got, this is happening in the back of the brain, the really million-year-old back of the brain, the animal ancestor part of the brain. You can't, she couldn't learn. She could go to as many therapy sessions on, like, okay, you regulate your system by breathing, by doing this, by, all these different strategies. But she got reinforced the moment she relaxed, step forward. Okay, I'll go. And so she got this instant reinforcement. And that's how she learned it. She learned it in the back of the brain. There was the two amygdalas were communicating with each other. But your theme about wanting to be loved, oh my gosh, that comes up all the time. And dogs have really ruined it for horses, because when you see a dog, it comes up to you and goes, what can I do for you? Can I please you do? I love you. I don't care what you do. I love you. Horses are like, hi, bye. Yeah. They do not care. They'll look at you in that one eye and that's it. They've made connection. That's all they need. They don't need to come up and we do actually have one who's a cuddle bunny because he's learnt that that's what children want. And he's learnt to actually put his leg around and hug them in, and he's learnt that. But that's not what horses are like. Horses they don't need anything from us. They don't need our love or approval. However, they love our connection and relationship, and they love our respect. They love doing things with us, but it's a different sort of relationship.
Our leadership.
And our leadership, when we turn into leaders, they're like, leadership is everything in a herd. Every horse is going, I could be leader tomorrow. I reckon it's a bit like the APS. I reckon I could have that job. And they're always doing that. They're all leadership, and when someone comes on, when a human turns up or a horse, we say to them, you will be treated as the bottom of the herd, the bottom of the hierarchy, because that's what the others will assume. Unless you do something that shows that you have leadership, and you know, simple as that. It feels so different. You feel it, you know it's different. If you have leadership, and leadership comes in lots of different forms, then you get respect from the horses. Yeah.
Phenomena that I've heard of, and I've heard a few people speak about it. There seem to be some people that have a psychic, intuitive ability to communicate with horses, say for example, and get feedback, and sort of kind of it implies that they understand what the horse wants or needs. Do you think that's a real rational thing, or does that actually happen, do you think? Have you noticed that with yourself? Can you?
Oh, well, how about your other feeding example? Yeah.
So I think my first thought as you spoke is an ability for deep listening.
Yeah.
Is the beginning of how much further it goes, I'm unsure, but I don't think a lot of humans spend enough time improving their deep listening. So as the deep listening happens, you can start to get more and more connections. So we had the black horse that was up there before, was an older horse. So she's in her high 20s, and the leader of the herd really loved her, probably as much as I loved her. And she needed extra food, and she would come down of a daytime, and I would almost feel that she was coming, and he would actually stop the rest of the herd from coming. I would see him standing at the gateway and allow her to walk all the way down. And this happened time and time and time again. And like, if I wasn't ready with it, she'd do it all right at the last moment, but mostly I would be there with the food. And the whole understanding was, if the whole herd came, I'm not feeding her, I'm not feeding everybody.
You have to feed everybody, you can't just feed one.
Yeah. So he did this day after day, where he found a way for her to come down at a time that I could recognise and have the food for her, and then she would eat and walk back up to the rest of the herd. So there's some sort of communication going on everywhere in that herd for that to happen 5 days out of 7.
Have you ever had like a thought, you're observing the horse's behaviour or some such, and you're very close to them? Do you ever get some thought that will come in your mind, oh, maybe I should do that? And it's quite intuitive. Does that ever happen to you?
I think
or you're just looking at
I feel lives like that, yeah.
Sorry?
I mean, I think the horses, I think they're quite amazing, that the way that they can do things. Like we have our house here, and basically the horses, like we have hundreds of acres, but you know, the horses can be positioned anywhere around, and you will find that the horses will move to a window where they know we are, and it could be way off in the paddock, but they'll position themselves in our sort of psychic space, and then we go, oh, they're just, and then we might, we'll be called to them, we'll do something, or something will happen. Yeah.
So our black horse we lost a year and a half ago, and the first inkling I had that something was wrong was she was laying down, looked totally normal, except that she was laying down on the dirt. And I called out to Saan and said, she's too elegant to lay on the dirt. Something's happening. And we called the vet because she laid on the dirt. She got up and she sort of showed a few other signs and then came good. But that was enough for us to know everything has changed. And that's just a communication. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that we've had because we've been working with them so closely for so long, I think we've learned, like I feel like they've tried to teach us something, or we've learned from them a little bit, and we've learned a little bit more. So the natural horsemanship sort of world where people aim to work with horses at liberty and without force and in partnership. The greatest of those, they will say to a horse, maybe say go backwards, and they might put a bit of pressure on or something, and they will take the pressure off when they see the horse thinking about going backwards. Not once it's at the sport, but you can just see the horse is starting to think. It might have just made and then the horse really thinks, wow, because the horses are so subtle in their communications. We have lost the ability to do good body language. We're really loud and clumsy, and so when we get really subtle like that, they reward us by doing magical things. Like we've had horses do magical things, and crazy things, like horses that our stallion, I'm like, oh, can you go over this jump for me? He's like, no, like absolutely not. I'm not doing that for you. I'm not interested. You're not going to make me do that. Okay, what about if you and I work together to get those two ponies over the jump? Over the jump, he goes, come on. he's just like, the sort of, yeah. Oh yeah. It's got to. So for horses, safety, food, and then play are that's their goals in their life. That's it basically. I mean, it should be the same for us.
We've also run a process at home 6 times or so between 2 to 4 days that we call mindfulness with horses. And so a group will come out, usually it was 11, we had 11 horses, and we would sit, and it was a mixture of basic meditation and then you had a horse. But what we did at the beginning was, after the first meditation, we had all photos of the 11 horses, all upside down. And all you had to do was pick up a card, so you didn't know which one, and that was your horse for the 2 to 4 days. And so the first exercise with the horse was simply to look at the horse. Don't go anywhere near it, just look at the horse. And that alone, having 10, 15 minutes of a person just watching the horse, just don't look at anyone else, just watch was enough for the horses to know who their person was. So if someone, the last one, had gone to the toilet and was late coming out, their horse was actually waiting, knowing that my person hasn't arrived. And we just slowly built the exercises. So, and it always involved lots of basically centering and mindfulness, so that you're arriving in a place where you're connected with yourself. And then you go out, and by the end, after 2 to 4 days, they were doing all these liberty exercises with the horses following, because they had just constantly built this connection.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think you're really right. It really, there's a lot less of the cognitive. It's very different. It's very, I mean, there is talking, but you know, it's talking about, it's talking about really different things. It's talking about, people are more somatic. They're more, they're more talking about emotions, and there's this, you know, symbols, and they might be talking about you know, visions and quests and things like that. It just naturally sort of comes out of this. Yeah. Yeah.
I just thought of the mindfulness.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
And so you get an awareness of yourself, which is a little bit of what came up. We had this beautiful Buddhist monk come to one of the mindfulness. He just loved horses and had been talking with Saan for years. And he came along, and we had big Arabs and we had little ponies, and picked up the card, and he got this little pony. And this little pony hadn't been near grass for ages. And he was sort of a bit that there were some big stunning horses, and he had this little pony. And then for the first few times, the little pony just wanted to eat grass. And so he's sort of there managing thoughts and expectations and thinking. He said to us, I was thinking, this pony's greedy.
Yeah. and out, they were almost like they would be like this with each other, back to back. They just weren't interested. There was no interest from the pony. It was just like, there was an unhappy marriage.
And he's just going, it's greedy. It's greedy. And a few sessions in, he sat there, and suddenly he went, I'm greedy because I want you just to focus on me. And just like, wow. And the photos of them over the night, everything changed.
Just so connected after that. They're just like absolutely in love. Yeah.
So this coming back and learning about yourself, what's actually in your subconscious. And
so there is a way that somehow there's
absolutely. Yeah.
So, well, we were going home a few months ago, and I was in a car behind Saan, and she called me and said, there's something on the road. I thought it was a leaf, but I'm not sure. I called her back and said, it's actually, I was going to say squirrel. Well, I've gone traveling. It's a possum. And it was a baby possum, not that young, but it had been on its mother's back. And she'd got a fright and run up the tree, and it's up the tree. And this possum's just on the side of the road, just sort of sitting there up on its back legs. And I've stopped and called Saan back, and she's come back from the other side and got out of the car with my jacket and bent down. And this possum ran straight across and jumped into the jacket.
Jumped into the arms. Yeah.
Just was like, and we rang and double checked, and they said, yeah, put it in a tree. The mother's watching, and I kept my eye on the mother, and she was watching. And they said, if you put it in a tree nearby, it'll come down and get it soon.
But it also, now I have to tell the other story, which is the thing about the interspecies connections are just extraordinary. When you see the way that animals will interact with each other. And another baby possum story was, I was watching this little possum. I was out in the paddock and I watched it running, and I'm thinking, oh, does it need rescuing or not? I'm not sure. It was a little ringtail. And I just, maybe it's going back to its nest or something. So I'm following it along, and it hadn't sort of seen me. And it ran to Alicia, who was one of our horses, who was standing next to a tree. And it ran up the tree, and I'm watching this, and I can't believe it. Ran up the tree, along the branch, and it reached out and it tried to touch the horse. And then the horse sort of moved away a bit. So it ran back down the tree and ran up the horse's leg. And at that point I moved in. I went, okay, this is not, you obviously do need rescuing. And it just relaxed in my hands. And then it was just so, oh, thank God somebody's found me. Like something's happened to its mother and it's alone. And but it was gonna go, look, I don't know what to do. This horse will do. You know, I need some other being. I need, you know, and we found it and took it into care and yeah. And then right away it was feeding actually. And they said, this is weird, it's just feeding straight away. It's like, oh, I've been rescued, I'm fine. You know, I trust the world.
So Alicia didn't adopt that.
No, Alicia was very suspicious about it. She was like, what about this?
So that's part of it. Whilst we're watching a herd, we're watching everything else as well.
Yeah. We have had a white kangaroo come often. When that comes, and it's so, why, I don't know, but it has so much meaning and so special, and people are so enamored. Like, I think if we could do white kangaroo assisted therapy, we'd probably, probably get a few people out in the paddock. But, you know, when the animals come, I mean, yeah, we actually see strange animals that are wallaroos. Wallaroos seem to have so many different forms, and they turn up. Sometimes they're really big and hairy. Sometimes they're small with black feet, and you go out there and people see them, and it's just the wonder, the childlike wonder that just is one of those moments you can re-chart your life in the face of Eastern grey kangaroos. Nah.
Even last night we were coming home, and Saan's been incredibly sick lately and is using a lot of energy tonight. But last night coming home was feeling really sick, and we nearly got run off the road, the dirt road, by this white car going really fast, and you're like, this is not good. And sure enough, a few minutes later, there's a wallaby that they'd hit. So we got out, and it was the baby. So the mother was dead, got the baby in a pillowcase, and Saan just held it against her to keep it warm. And it woke up, like, even by the end of the night, by the time getting home, it improved a lot. And this morning, so
yeah, I was feeling very sorry. I was feeling very self-pitying, and then it just left. Yeah. So this little being was in a lot worse situation.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
And so compassion and physical health are aligned.
Yeah.
James was one of the solid centers as the irrigation being developed. He was riding a horse and pulling a scoop to build irrigation scoop. He told me that the reason that we have a 1 hour lunchtime in public service and all that is because that's about the amount of time a horse needs to have its lunch.
Wow. Wow.
I think that's maybe true in that.
Look, I actually started collecting a list of sayings. I don't know where it is, of all the sayings that are like have come from the horses, like, you know, headstrong, give it a bit more rein. They're just very obvious ones, but there are just in our the interconnection with us is so much, and some of it maybe is not, you know, not being so great for the horses, but they've definitely been with us and shaping us for a long time. I don't think we're able to shape them. They're still just, you know, quite wild spirits, really. Most horses, even the littlest, tiniest miniature horse, can be quite a wild thing. Yeah.
Are you doing therapy anymore?
What are you doing with mindfulness more?
Yes, we're open to all things. Something that I actually do want to do start is a conservation therapy group. But you know, we offer therapy. I work out of Yass for a couple of days a week in an office because that's a big part of the demand. But I still have my, you know, slab hut room at the farm, and you know, where there's animals all over the place in nature. But yeah, I want to do a and you know, it can be Medicare rebated group for conservation therapy. Yeah. That's something I really want to get up going. Just
so would you have to be in conservation?
No, just anybody can turn up for their mental health. That would be the goal would be their mental health.
No, I'm thinking leadership. You know, like for people who want to do leadership in the area, but perhaps get more frustrated with the people they're trying to educate than help them because, you know, there's just no.
That's a great theme. Yeah, we've worked with all sorts of organisations. We haven't really. Well, we have actually worked with Greens. We've done workshops for the. We've worked with sorts of. We do actually do leadership and sort of the more corporate thing, even though we don't. You know, sort of obviously.
So we've had groups come in from overseas that teach leadership. And I had said to them, I met one of them in Germany, and I said, you want to know about leadership? You come talk to our horses. So they organised to bring their top 12 people that taught leadership over for 3 days. And they learnt about, they said, we gave them quite a good rate, hoping they would go back and tell people. And they came back the following year and said, we haven't told anyone. We've improved so much, we want to keep it a secret. Okay, that backfired. But they actually flew the next team out the following year.
Because they were so open to it. They were people that hadn't had a lot to do with any animals before, and they were just so open to receiving this that they went home and redid their whole, you know, huge international business plan based on what they learned in the arena with the horses.
They were also very open to metaphor.
Yeah, they were open to metaphors. Yeah. Yeah.
The group that came over.
Oh, so many. The metaphors are they're just drenched. Working with horses is drenched in metaphors. So just one that I'm just trying to think of one that they
just with this group when they were asked to, as a group at Liberty, take the stallion from one end to the other. And all of a sudden, the leader stood behind and organised the group. And as it moved, kept organising who was standing. And later told us that that was how she was going to do her whole organisation. She got all the information she needed with watching this group with this horse.
But they naturally formed that pattern. The pattern that they needed to walk our very, very incredibly powerfully independent stallion who would never do anything unless it was 100% consensual. They formed a certain, they felt that they needed this person here and that person there and that, and then they took it home and organised their organisation in that way. That these people will be supports, these people will be leaders, these people will be raising energy. Yeah, they built that. Yeah. The other thing that they learned from that was, I think the first interaction with the horses was just, you know, honeymoon. Oh, look, it's so good, it's so good, it's so, you know. And then the next, what always happens, we've known to watch for this, is the second interaction, people have their expectations. Oh, you did this last time, so you're going to do this again, or something is going to be this. And the horses don't like it. They don't like the expectations. They're like, no, see you later. I'm going, I'm leaving. The people come with expectations and And so suddenly the horses all just sort of didn't do anything for all of them. They didn't do it. They didn't do what they wanted. And what they learned from that was they said, this is exactly how it is with our stakeholders in our organisation, which we need. They're some sort of, I don't know what their stakeholders are. They're not, but they're people that they need for their organisation that are outside their organisation. And they said, so they totally reworked the way they work with their stakeholders from the reaction of the horses. So metaphors everywhere. There are metaphors everywhere with horses, because people go, oh, that's like this or that's like that, and yeah. Well, I think that the mirror neuron in horses is extraordinary. So the mirror neuron where you learn from someone else is doing something. So we know that because, so we've had this joy of living in amongst a herd of horses that not many people get. Often people have one horse or two. So we get to watch the whole herd. So we've got a very greedy pony. We had a very greedy pony. And so I had to teach him, because he just, give me the food, And so I taught him, look away, and then I'll give you your food, right? And I taught this one little pony, he's very quick, so he learned it very quickly. Like, look away, there you get the food. And so now all of our horses, if you don't give them their food right away, they try to look away in case that's going to get the food quicker. No, they didn't learn it. They learned it from him. So they learned, and we've had horses from who passed away, a generation of, still doing the same things. They've never met the original horse, and they still have the habits get passed through. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
Perhaps suggest we come back to the way we started it with a bit of a long-term evolution perspective. The way horses have evolved, co-evolved with human beings, in a sense. I wonder where we're going, because horses are no longer being bred for jousting, They're no longer being bred hopefully for military purposes at all.
Yeah.
They're no longer, many old parts of the world not being bred for agriculture. So the fancy type horses and so forth.
You're absolutely right.
Very little use for them.
You're absolutely right.
Recently defined for racing, for example, which means that a lot of the other useful attributes bring out.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Survival.
Yeah.
With this huge supreme performance in racing, for example. I wonder where this piece will be in 100 years or 500 years.
I think you could talk to a lot of people are pretty concerned about where we're going with the horse breeding. I mean, we're having horses bred for the show, for looks. The Arabian horses for the shows, they need to have big eyes and jowls, and they can't breathe. I mean, they can still breathe, obviously, but they can't breathe the way a horse with the original Arabian horse could, with its sort of more wide nose. Yeah, the horses, their feet are, people are not breeding for feet. Now, feet is the foundation of a horse, so people are breeding even though they've got deformed feet. So our horses are going way downhill. They're really, you see more and more hoof problems.
So anyone who loves horses would be concerned about lack of the survival of the fittest principle in future generations.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are people that are trying to do the right thing with, but I think the overall intent of what a horse is not serving the horse generally. Yeah.
So in the US, it is quite big with their services to the soldiers and the emergency services.
Equine assisted therapy.
That the horses now heal the damage done in the emergency services and the air and the armed services. So that's big and getting bigger and bigger. And so perhaps that's by them entering the therapeutic field.
Yeah.
Perhaps they've organised themselves to find another role.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Thanks very much. It's been absolutely fabulous.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you so much for us to think about. And John.